that. Okay, so here's what we're going to end with today. So quick overall. We started yesterday with clarify your vision, right? We talked about vision culture, and then we talked about change, because once you have a clear vision, oftentimes that leads to, all right, if we're going to really reach people and focus on the mission and clarify all these things, it's probably going to require some change, and church people hate change. Which is really ironic, because part of spiritual growth and transformation requires what? Change. And then the other truth is every church is changing all the time, isn't it? It's like there's no such thing as maintaining. You're either changing for good or you're changing for bad. So you can say you hate change, but you're actually changing. So it's like let's be intentional. So we talked about change, and now we're in the third bucket, which is develop leaders yourself. It starts with you. We talked all about that, and then tomorrow we're going to talk about the gift we're going to give some of you with that. And now for the next hour, I'm going to try to be done by 4. We're going to talk about developing your team, right? Because we need a team. So my question is, who's in your boat? Who's in your boat? So every year, my wife Ashley and I, we love, like our favorite place in the world, and we do like to travel. She likes to travel, and I go along with her. And our favorite place in the world is this place on the north shore of Lake Superior called Grand Marais, Minnesota. Grand Marais, Minnesota, it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Well, her uncle has this cabin in Grand Marais, and it's on the far east end of a very long lake. So the lake is, it's like 3 to 5 miles long. So it's a super, super long lake. And the cabin's on the east end. So we go up there in the fall, when it's like the fall in Minnesota. It's the most gorgeous place ever, right? The leaves are changing colors. So we go up there, we're driving down dirt roads. We get to this cabin, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And we're there with our 2 best friends, Matt and Megan. So we get to this cabin, and Matt and I are outside, and we notice that they have this boat, this like old, tiny little boat. It's like red. It's like a little fishing boat, and it was tipped, upside down. So we flip over the boat, and we're like, I wonder if there's like a motor for it. So we go to the shed. It's locked. We take out a credit card, open it, and we go in there, and it's like, oh, there's like a little Johnson 9-horse. And there's a gas can and everything. Let's hook it up to the boat, and let's see if this thing turns on. So we hook it up. And it fires up, and we just get bright-eyed. And we're like, let's go get Ashley and Megan, and let's see if they want to go for a boat ride. And this lake it's beautiful, right? And so they're like, yeah, let's do it. It was kind of, it's in the fall, so it's getting cold, and this was in the evening. So the sun is kind of setting, just picturesque. We get in the boat, we take off, and I'm driving the boat. And I'm just cruising around shore, and like leaves are falling, and there are ducks taking off, and we're having this moment with our best of friends and our favorite part of the whole world. We almost get to the end of the lake, and then they say, we should turn around and go back. And I respond, we said we were going to go to the other side of the lake, and I am a finisher. The other side of the lake is right there. And they're like, yeah, but it's kind of getting cold. It's getting dark. The wind is picking up. Let's turn around and go to the other side of the lake. I'm like, no, we're going to go. You're like, let's go to the cabin. I'm like, no, we're going to go home. We're going to go all the way to the other side of the lake. And within 30 seconds, I hit a huge rock. The motor flies up, almost rips off the boat, and completely dies. So they look at me, and they look at the oars that they lovingly reminded me not to forget to put in the boat. And they're like, you better start paddling. So, I try to fire up the engine, wouldn't start. I grab the oars. I'm paddling back. It's getting late. The wind is blowing now towards us. We're miles away from the cabin in the middle of nowhere. There's barely any other cabins on this lake. And they were just like, you have got to be kidding me, dude. So then they look at Matt, and they're like, you're more of a man than Aaron. Maybe you can fix the motor. Because he is. He's like construction guy, builds houses. My wife looks at, she's like, I've never seen a man with softer hands. I'm like, I'm a pastor, come on. Whatever. In Brazil, they have these terms. They're like, there are two types of guys. Men who are root, that's like my brother, like root, and then men who are Nutella. And they're like, Aaron, you're Nutella. I'm like, whatever, yes I am. So Matt goes to the back of the boat. He messes with it. He fires. He gets it running, and then we get back to the cabin, and it was like, oh my gosh, thank you. But I tell you that because I think with leadership, oftentimes we're with our team, we're in ministry, we're cruising along, everything is good, and then we hit a rock. We're like, let's go to the other side of the lake. Let's get to where we're going, and stuff happens. And in that specific case, who was in our boat mattered. Like I was in the boat with my bestest of friends and my wife, and a guy who could fix it, fix what I couldn't, and we got back. And I think who's in our boat as leaders matters. I think of in Scripture when the disciples and Jesus said, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." So note to self: anytime someone says, "Let's go to the other side of the lake," don't do it. Never turns out well. So they get in the boat. But what's powerful in that teaching is the disciples did not get in the boat alone. They were in the boat with other disciples. It says they got into the boat with the other disciples and Jesus. And they were cruising to the other side of the lake. Jesus, right, you know the story, decides to take a nap, and then a storm comes. And they call out to Jesus, and he wakes up, and he's like, why do you have little faith? Storm, shut up, and it shuts up, and they're like, wow. And they get to the other side of the lake, and it's like, who is in your boat matters so much. And I love what we just talked about. Don't try to lead alone. So we're going to talk about our team. So if you turn to page something, is it 67? Is that right? It's called the 4 Colors of Development. So you'll see 57. So we're 10 pages off. That's the thing to know, because we update. We're always trying to make it better. We're going to talk about the 4 colors of development. So this is what I'm going to share with you is a very simple, kind of simple tool, maybe oversimplified in some way, of thinking about your people, okay, in colors. Now, I'm going to make a disclaimer, and I'm going to preface something here. As we talk about this, we are not necessarily saying people have different value or worth. Okay, we know God created all people. Everyone matters to God. Everyone is gifted by God. Jesus died for everybody, and God calls us to love, right? We show no favorites. So everyone is equal in the Lord's eyes, right? So we're all in agreement. I get that. We understand that. As leaders, though, of a church, of an organization, again, our call is to steward our people, and part of leadership is noticing and differentiating the gifts and the abilities among the people, and knowing like who has this David spirit in them, right? And how do I help them? And then maybe who God is just, calling them to different things or not as high of levels, where we can't just treat everyone equal in regards to opportunity, right? It's part of like leadership and development. So part of what we have at Eagle Brook, it's like we'll often say, who are the blues in our church? So I'm going to start with blues. So I'm going to draw the blue circle, and we say blues are the eagles. So it's like we want to hire eagles. Now, when I'm talking about team and when I'm talking about hire, you have to contextualize, right? For some of you, team and hire is a volunteer. Maybe you're bivocational. For others of you, it is a staff or layers of staff or groups of volunteers. So you have to contextualize this. But like on our team, we want eagles because eagles know how to soar. In a book, Up Your Business, I think it's David Anderson, he's like, you got to hire eagles, not turkeys. Because eagles know how to soar, and turkeys, we know what they do, they just put on a show. And one of the most difficult things for us to kind of discern is that it's so easy for us to get seduced by talent. Right? It's like they are super talented, but it's like, ooh, talent doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be great. So what do we look for in eagles? We look for people who are embodying those 9 qualities. Right? No one's perfect, but who's embodying those 9 qualities? The other thing we've noticed is you can either buy an eagle or you can build an eagle. And what we want to do is we want to try to have a system at our church where we are developing and building and hiring eagles from within. So often we're training our staff, our campus pastors, by saying, who are you having I see in you conversations? So it's looking at people who are owners of your church, they're bought in, and maybe oftentimes they work at Target Corporation, they work at 3M, they're realtors, they're making 6 figures, they're crushing it in the business world, and it's like they are some of the most devoted volunteers, and you're trying to filter, it's like, is there a call on their life? And what's fascinating to me is almost every single one of our executive leaders at Eaglebrook and our highest levels of leaders, if you ask them, what's your story? It wasn't, well, I went to college to be a pastor and it was always my dream, and then I got hired and I worked at multiple churches, now I ended up Eaglebrook. It was, Bob Merritt tapped me on the shoulder when I worked at Bethel and said, I see something in you, will you come be a part of this mission? It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're going to work a lot, and we're not going to pay you very much. Are you in? But God is going to use you. And it's like over and over and over again, that's the story. So we're trying to look at who is God gifted as a leader, and we will help train them to be a pastor. We will help qualify them, right? It's not necessarily like, did you graduate from seminary? Great, you can lead. A lot of people who go to seminary can't lead themselves out of a paper bag. No, it's just true. It's sad, but it's like theology doesn't mean you're going to be a great leader. And theology is important. I'm not minimizing that. So Eagles, it's like that's who we want on our team. They embody the 9 qualities, and they're people who, so then we'll look at our organization, our team that we have after we get them on, and we'll say, okay, now that we have people on staff, who are the Eagles who are the Blues within our staff right now, even within our volunteers? And it's like, okay, well, how do we know if I'm a campus pastor, again, this in our context, and I'm looking at all of maybe I have 15 people, they all can't be blue. So think about this. I want to hire I want everyone to be great, but once they're all great, not everyone can be the first line starting captain of the team. Right? So even in the NHL, it's like there are first line, second line, third line. It's all over in sports. It's in life. So it's like, okay, who's the blue? Who's the eagle? And their stock is full. They're proven wise leaders. They're the best of the best. And another way to think of them is when you're looking at your team, there's part of you that's going, who's next in line for a seat at the table? So if someone in my leadership team leaves or retires or whatever, like who is ready or are we preparing to take that spot? Or I love, if you're like the senior pastor, I think every senior, Bob just modeled this to like incredible, this rather than I'm done, it's not my job to help find the person, our bylaws, we have a search committee, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, man, he identified someone and spent years training and preparing them to naturally take over, right? It's like when I retire, who am I equipping to take over? You might prepare someone, which I love what's happening here. I mean, like Daniel, it's like now we're going to send you to go plant. That's great too. There's no one better than, but you're always thinking, who are the Eagles? And of another term we have is, who are the people on staff who are vomit worthy? And that basically means if they ever came into our office and said, hey, I'm leaving, you want to vomit because they're so important. right? Some people you're like, don't let the door hit you on the butt on the way out, and you're thanking Jesus, yes, now I don't have to have a crucial conversation. But others, you're like, you have got to be kidding me. Are you sure? Is there anything we can do? You feel it. And you're excited for them, but it hurts. You want to vomit, right? You know those are your blues. So what do you do with these blues? What do you do with these eagles? You want to let them soar. Don't let them get bored. Don't have this micromanagement mentality. Don't just delegate tasks. You know, I'm the pastor, I'm in charge, I want you to do these things. Delegate responsibility. Give them extra investment. And it's not fair. I had a hockey coach that said to our team, if you want fair, it's down on Snelling in late August, which was the location of the Minnesota State Fair. He's like, life's not fair. It's just not fair, and you can't just treat everyone fairly. So it's like you're looking at these people like, okay, as a leader, I'm going to give them more than maybe I give other people. And it may hurt other people, but that's just life. Do a 360, right, or a self-awareness to show them they're ripping their shorts, not because they've gotten to the point where they need it, but because they crave it, and you want them to grow. But ultimately, for blues, you are doing what you can to prepare them for a bigger platform so that when that opportunity comes up, they're ready for it. When I was the campus pastor at our Anoka, when we went from, mobile to permanent, and then we were our Anoka campus, we had someone on our staff who was a blue. His name was Jeff Dodge. He was our pastor of groups. And I had great people on my team, but I would take Jeff out to, coffee, to lunch. I'd have extra conversations with him. And I would say, Jeff, I can't promise you anything, but I want to do whatever I can to prepare you to be a next campus pastor at this church, right? It's not my job to hire. I have no say. All I have is influence, but I want to prepare you even though I can't promise anything. And then when I got asked to go on to do a different role on our central team, he applied for the job. He had to go through all the motions, but it came to the point where he was like, oh, for sure, he's the obvious one. Because there was that extra, and I didn't know I was going to move on to anything else. I just wanted to prepare him. And then he became the campus pastor. It was just, you love that as a leader. That just personally, it was like, yes, the system worked. Right? So are you doing that? Are you preparing them for a bigger platform? And honestly, it takes humility to do that. The next is green. Now, these are your, strong contributors. What makes someone green? If you think of sports, if you're blue, that's like your captain, your all-star. When there's 2 minutes left on the clock and you're playing for the Stanley Cup, you want them on the ice. I'm speaking hockey terms. Green, that's like the other starters, the other great people on your team. They are super important. You would lose without them. Right? Greens are hopefully the majority of your team. They're the majority. Not everyone can be blue. Maybe someone who's a green on your team was a blue on a different team, and then maybe they got promoted. Now they're a green, right? And greens are so important. What makes them green? I mean, when you look at the 9 qualities, they're still very solid. They're solid. You trust them. They're gifted. They're growing. They're trustworthy. They get the job done. You're never worried about them. It doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be ready for the next big thing right now. Hopefully they will become blues. So what do you do with greens? Does anyone watch The Karate Kid? Anyone watch? Okay. So one of my favorite scenes on The Karate Kid is they have a bonsai tree. And I am not a bonsai tree expert at all. So But what I remember from the movie is this scene where it's like he's making the bonsai tree, and from what I know of bonsai trees is you constantly water them and pruning them to sort of shape them the way that you want. So when I think of greens, it's as leaders, how are we like pruning them and shaping them and helping, clip the little things off to continuously try to make them a little bit better? How are we being intentional with specific positive feedback? Hey, to continue to replicate things. Specific negative feedback. Hey, this isn't a big deal, but here's a little something you should work on. Constantly giving them feedback to make them better. Some practical things you can do with greens on your team is invite them in and include them on stuff. So with Dale and I, with the EBA, as we continue to travel, and Dale has done this for years, he's always bringing blues and sometimes greens with him. So he can just give them a little extra investment and opportunity. Maybe you invite them into a meeting or into your office and you say, hey, our church, I'm thinking about something, I'm struggling with something, here's a problem, what are your thoughts? And you're just asking them for their thoughts. It's making them better. The goal for a green is you want to help greens become greener or eventually become blues. Now, this may be harsh. You may disagree with this, and that's fine. But sometimes people who are green will always be green. Maybe within your organization or church. It's like they may be the best, brightest green ever, but they may not ever be the next senior leader or on the leadership team, right? But they might be like an incredible number 2 or number 3. And that's okay. But do you know the difference? Are you looking at your team and saying, there's my blue, and then here are the greens? Now, the next color is yellow. And these are just people, for whatever reason, they need some improvement. Maybe they're brand new. You just hired them. They just joined the team. They just got promoted. They're new, and they have a lot to learn. They're yellow. They're not green yet. Maybe it's like Dale's story. They come into the office and say, I've just learned my stock is falling. Right? There's some rips in my shorts, apparently, that are a big deal. And now they're now yellow. And it's okay because we love yellows. We love our yellows. But as a church, we are not okay letting yellow stay yellow. And too often, because we're Christians, we just let yellow stay yellow. But what happens when you let a yellow leader stay yellow? You know what happens? The whole team becomes yellow, and then the whole ministry becomes yellow. Do you want a yellow kids ministry? I don't. I want a green or blue kids ministry or student ministry or worship team. So when someone gets yellow, you can't let them stay yellow. But in order to not let them stay yellow, do you notice that they're yellow? Are you aware? Are you watching because you have this mindset of developing other people? Or someone on your team, right, has that mindset of developing other people? So what do we do with yellows? It's maybe you need to retrain them. Maybe they've been around and they're a yellow, and it's just like you need to retrain, because I think with leaders, the first thing you're looking at is it me? Are they yellow because I haven't been clear? Or are they yellow, and this is very common in church, are they yellow because I have expectations for them and they don't even have a job description? So we have a job description for every single volunteer role at our entire church, even a host who's holding a door. Because there's expectations that's great for them and the leader to talk about. So it's like, all right, here's the role, here's what it is. So it's like, yellows are those on the staff too who now have to go on a performance plan. Maybe it's like they've been a yellow for a while. It's like, all right, we're going to put you on a 90 or 60 or 90-day performance plan. Very strategic, intentional, with the heart and the goal of we're doing this because we want to help you get better. And the goal for a yellow is you got to get a yellow to a green. You don't want to rush it. It's not necessarily as fast as possible, but you can't wait. And lastly, maybe they're a yellow because they're in the wrong role. And you need to reposition them. Because sometimes, how would I put it? So I know a pastor right now. This is a current thing. We're even texting earlier today. There's a pastor who's been a senior pastor for 11 years at a church, and he's just feeling him and his family are being released from that church. And then he reached out and he was like, "Hey, man, is there anything? I'm keeping eye at Eagle Brook, and I noticed this role that you have posted called the Kids Ministry Developer role." And it's a very important role. It's a very awesome role, but it's like an entry-level role. And I had to have a conversation with him. I'm like, dude, that is not the best role for you. And you also have like 18 kids, and I tell you right now, it's not a role that's necessarily going to financially pay enough to support all your kids and your family, right? It's not. And but my point is sometimes people want to be a part of your church so much that they'll just take the first open job. They get in that job, and it doesn't align with their gifts, and they're not really good at it, and they're always struggling, and they're yellow because they're not in the right role, the seat on the bus. So that could be why they're yellow, but you got to get them green. And then lastly, red. These are people who are struggling. And that is a very nice word. Why are they red? It could be major reoccurring issues or flaws. It could be toxic. There are a few reasons, but it's like, how do you know they're a red and not a yellow? Honestly, my response is, you know. Like, you just know. It's like, reds are those who keep you up at night. They're the people who are just like maybe they're trying to destroy something. It's kind of like they become the wolf in the sheep pen, and you got to protect the bride. You got to protect the flock. And if someone becomes red, you have to deal with them right away. Because the longer you keep a red around, because we're Christian and we know God loves them. And we still want them to be a part of our church and grow, and we're graceful. I get the tension of all that. But if you keep a red around too much, they will snipe, they will destroy, it's not good. And we've had some moments where we've done this, and it never ends well when you keep a red around too much. And very rarely, hopefully, do you have reds. I would say, at our staff right now, maybe we have one red right now. But once someone becomes red, they're usually gone quickly. And again, hopefully you notice that they're yellow before they become red, and you can do something about it. So what do you do with reds? You remove them as quick as you can, if possible. And the thing with the red is if you ignore a red for too long, they will suck all your time, they will suck all your energy, they will pull yellows down. And then again, with what I was saying with crucial conversations, the blues are gonna leave. Because they're not gonna want to put up with someone who's a red for very long. And you'll feel it in your ministry. Right? If you have a red leader in kids or students, you'll start to notice it. Metrics, numbers don't lie. You start to lose volunteers. But do you notice that it's red? Lastly, I'll say about red, don't reposition a problem. We've done that before, where someone's like, they're really struggling in this area or this department, and they're kind of like a red. So it was a few years ago. So what do? We move them to a different department. And guess what? That person is still the same person at a different department. And over time, everything became red. Then red again. It was like, oh, this is a problem. So any questions on this before we move on? It says this makes sense. It's just a very simple kind of way of thinking of developing your people and your team.